Welcome to the Indianapolis Museum of Art. I'm Lisa Fryman, the Senior Curator and Chair of the Contemporary Art Department, and I am sitting here with my friends, Sammy Cucher and Anthony Aziz of Aziz and Cucher, and I'd like to welcome them here to Indianapolis. Please join me.
Thank you, Lisa.
We're going to have a very casual conversation tonight about their work. I want to start by thanking the Contemporary Art Society in particular for sponsoring tonight's reception. I'd also like to thank Steve and Livia Russell for their support of tonight's event. And I'd like to just say a general thank you to all of you for caring enough to come out tonight and to learn a little bit about an artist's work who you may or may not know. Sammy and Anthony came to me through some other artists who I love very dearly, Type A, who have team building a line in 100 Acres. And I ask artists who I love and respect very frequently if they can give me a list of their top 10 artists who they believe are incredibly talented, deserving, and under-recognized. And so they gave me a list, and I actually diligently went through the list. It's the way, unfortunately or fortunately, the way that we work so often is through the internet, and so I started from websites and went through person by person, and I can honestly say I don't remember any of the other artists who are on the list except for Aziz and Cucher, because when I saw their work, I was immediately taken by it for its strength, its formal rigor, its intelligence, and I thought, well, I need to know these guys, and I have to admit, slightly embarrassed that I didn't know their work better, and in part that's because they were some of the artists who are at the forefront of digital photography in the early 90s. They were some of the first artists to use Photoshop in their work to do digital manipulation of photography, which now sounds cliche, but at that moment was anything but that. It was quite radical, in fact. And they weren't just taking on technology, but they were taking on technology in relation to visual technology, in relation to some of the most pressing issues that we were facing in the aesthetic realm. In the early 90s, some of you will remember the Robert Mapplethorpe exhibition, the censorship battles that ensued, and the NEA4, the questions about the definition of decency in relation to contemporary art, and the issue of how do we define what is acceptable for representation. And their earliest work really took that on head on. Sammy and Anthony met in 1992.
Well, we met him about 1990.
And we started working together in 1992.
Okay, so close. 90 they met, 92 they started working together. They met, it's actually a beautiful love story, and I'm not going to get too saccharine, but they met, Sammy saw Anthony's thesis exhibition in graduate school, and when he saw it, he thought, I need to meet this guy, and arranged through some friends to meet each other, and I think there was a dinner party. That's a whole nother topic of artistic conversation, but I am not going to go there. But anyway, soon after, they fell in love, and then they started working together, and they've had an incredible run. And I have to say that their work has really, I think in a lot of ways, not received the kind of institutional support that it really deserves. And it is an incredible honor as a representative of the Indianapolis Museum of Art and someone who is a diehard missionary for contemporary art to be able to support them and their work and to to be able to participate in realizing a new body of work, and not only a new body of work in an exhibition, which I hope you'll all be able to see, but an exhibition catalog which will be published in coordination with Haja Kantz in Germany, which is a major contemporary art publisher. And I hope that only good things will come from this. And I'm grateful to everyone from top to bottom from the Indianapolis Museum of Art, and I don't say this lightly, that we have an incredibly talented staff here who works diligently, and I can't possibly name every individual here, but there are so many people who collaborate with me to make these projects happen. I'm only the figurehead, and it is an honor to work here and to work amidst all of you who bring incredibly rigorous intentionality to everything that you do, and I just want to say thank you. And I want to now stop blabbing and let Sammy and Anthony talk about their work, which is the most important issue of the hour. So here we go.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
We'll kiss and hug a lot later tonight. So we also just want to take a moment. We will try to be brief, but we are somewhat aged, and we have been around a few years. So we have some projects that we'd like to share with you. But before we do, we just want to take a moment to thank all of you for coming out tonight. As Lisa pointed out, it's great for so many people to take an interest in this kind of work, and especially our fan club, who flew in from various parts, including Sammy's family from Israel, and our friends from New York and Miami and Chicago. It's really wonderful to see everybody here. And again, of course, Lisa and her wonderful team in the Contemporary Art Department, Amanda York and Gabrielle, who've been amazingly supportive, and Brad and Lara and your teams, thank you so much. We really, really, really are blown away by seeing and experiencing our ideas come to manifest themselves in ways that we could not have even imagined. And we have pretty good imaginations. But there's something about walking through the space upstairs, which I hope most of you have had a chance to do. The impeccable execution of the installation is just staggering. So thank you for all of that.
I second that. You don't want to hear it again.
Enough thank yous. So where should we begin?
Well, like Anthony said, we have 20 years of work together, and it would be really complicated to try to cover every aspect of our work. But we just thought that we would at least highlight a few of the early projects that we did, in order to show how certain themes or certain strategies of work have continued. What happened?
Sorry, we're getting there.
Have continued to be present in our work, and hopefully when you go and see the work upstairs, you will start seeing connections to things that were from the very early moment part of our thought process. So this was the first project that we ever did together. It's called Faith, Honor, and Beauty. And as Lisa mentioned, it was a response to the questions about censorship and decency in art that were raging back in 1991 when we started working together as a team. And our intention with this work was really to be satirical, and that's also a certain thread of humor that survives through some of our projects, and to create works that could not be censored, but by the fact that they could not be censored, they became kind of ridiculous. And so they are these monumental figures in which the genitals and nipples, the navels, have been erased, but yet they are these very realistically looking photographs. So this is the first time that we used a digital manipulation of the image to achieve this vision, and the result, this paradox of something that looked very realistic, but at the same time was kind of impossible, was what we think something that made the work successful and startling at the same time. And people were kind of like, oh, wow, what's going on here? So this is faith, honor, and beauty, and also there's an interest in the human body, an interest in classical poses, in work, so in reflecting on traditions and conventions of works of art. In this case, dealing things that come directly from classical sculpture, and also the conventions of socialist realist work, like Nazi and Soviet artworks. So that's project number one that we wanted to highlight.
And hopefully, for those of you who've been upstairs, and we'll talk a little bit about the work, Some People, which we are showing tonight, can begin to see some of these formal and aesthetic strategies that aren't explicitly connected, but they do remain under the surface of everything that we do, that Sammy has described. So the next project is, we're not going to go through all of the work, just bear with us. We're just going to talk about these two because they are in some ways fundamental to understanding how we began our collaboration and where we've gotten to today.
This is not loading properly. Can you refresh? There it is. So this is the Dystopia series, and this was done in 1994, 1995, and it was a series of portraits, quote unquote, in which all the facial features have been digitally erased, and you might have encountered these works maybe in publications. It is work that was very well received at the time, and the idea behind this work had to do with a kind of science fictional approach to the evolution of the human body, and to the idea that if we were going to be communicating through machines, through computers more and more, and we were living in San Francisco at the time, in very close to Silicon Valley, where all this internet technology was starting to come to the front and become popular and become installed in all the homes. And it was the first time that people were saying, things about, well, you don't have to go to the bank anymore. You can bank from your house. You don't have to go to the grocery store anymore. You can shop from your house. You don't have to meet anybody anymore. You can just,
At the time, it did feel like science fiction, but here we are.
Now here we are today, Skyping and Facebooking and all that. And our approach, it's unfortunate this is not happening. Our approach has always been one of asking the question, well, what if this? What if that? And in this case, we took this question of evolution very seriously, and the idea, well, if you don't use your sensory organs anymore to communicate face to face with people, what would happen? What would you lose, and what would you be reduced to? And these are the images that came out of that question, and they are kind of monsters, and they're very tough, very very difficult images to watch, because we want to see the face, but we cannot see the face, and that paradox again. And again, these are very realistic looking images. They're truly photographic images, but again, of something that is impossible. And that paradox is something that has been maintained throughout our work, really over most of our work. Okay, so...
we have them here.
Yeah.
So, this one. So we're going to show you very briefly a couple of video clips of a project we started in 2003. We were commissioned by the Parc de la Villette in Paris to create our first real multi-channel video and audio immersive installation. Just going to pause here for a moment. What we're looking at is the documentation of an installation at I-Beam in New York. It was first exhibited in Paris at the Parc de la Villette in a festival called La Numérique Festival, Numérique, a digital festival that they, at that time, were having every 2 years that was a summary or a synopsis of the most important digital works, including electronic music, choreography, more conceptual uses of the computer as an art form. And we were invited to create this piece. It came much further down the road from what Sammy was describing with the representation of the body in terms of the post-human body. This project was really an attempt to represent the experience of perception seen through a digital lens, where the barrier between what is natural and what is unnatural, or what is organic and inorganic, what is outside of the body and what is inside of the body, there's a kind of collapse that seems to be occurring between time and space as the result of new technologies becoming part of our existence. And that was sort of the operating system that we used to create this work.
Am I allowed to add? Okay. So one of the interesting things about this piece is that while it's dealing with sort of the post body and these what is the word? I've totally lost it. But the post-human and the notion of there being these transitions between the body and consciousness, that they've created sort of an aesthetic representation of the body that is manufactured through all of the literally manufactured products that we use to care for our bodies, like Alka-Seltzer, Pepto-Bismol, shaving cream, and the like. And so a lot of the effects that you see that they've created that seem incredibly organic are generated through the
Very unnatural.
Very artificial materials.
Pharmaceutical means.
Or things that are applied to the body.
Right.
So this connection to the body is always present in one way or another. Yeah. So this video, this installation takes as its structure the idea of the seasons, and it's like an electronic garden. I mean, we're seeing, just jumping through excerpts of it, and it has these various moods, and the moods are dictated by the notion of the season. So there's a spring season of growth, and then there's a summer season of exaltation. There's a fall season of storms, and a winter season of chill and sort of like hibernation. And we wanted to share this work tonight because the work upstairs is also a work of various moods, but it is expanded in a way. All the moods in Synaptic Bliss, which is the name of this piece, are contained within this one space, and the viewer sort of is carried through the video to all these different spaces and moods and insides and outsides. The installation upstairs is the viewer travels through the space to encounter these different moods. So there are 4 pieces in the installation upstairs, and each one of the pieces has a very distinct and individual approach, both technical but also in terms of the emotional load of each one of the pieces. So we have created a landscape that we invite the audience to navigate, and then to carry with them whatever meaning they find in the piece.
When I did my first studio visit with Sammy and Anthony, Synaptic Bliss was extremely important to me. It actually was when I saw their work on the internet for the first time, because it tied to the IMA in many ways in relation to its connection to aesthetics and nature and architecture simultaneously. And I thought that they could be interesting artists to engage in those questions, but in a new way. And so I never could have imagined that when I brought them in to think about those issues, that they would bring architecture and landscape and aesthetics to bear on the conflict in the Middle East.
We didn't expect that either.
And so why don't we talk a little bit about the work that you've created for the IMA? And they had an incredible, I'll start as they're loading things, to say they had an incredible opportunity of things coming together, and one of which was the IMA saying, we want to support you to create a new body of work. The other was Parsons School of Art and Design agreeing to give them a sabbatical that they deserved, and then some funding from a private collection and foundation that was willing to give them money towards the development of new work instead of just collecting some of their work, which was really important from a philanthropic standpoint for them to be able to push their work to the next level. And they eventually said to me, well, we're thinking we're going to go on a 9-month residency to Israel, Lebanon, Palestine, the Balkans, and Berlin. And we're not sure what's going to come of it, but we want to do that and capture a lot of footage and learn as much as we can, and we'll see what happens.
Well, so this is what happened. Like I mentioned, there are four works upstairs in the galleries, in the Forefront Galleries. The first work that you encounter as you enter is a 3-projection piece of animated drawings called Time of the Empress. And as you will see, there are animated drawings of buildings that are in a state of constant growth and destruction at the same time. So again, the question of paradox is very important in this piece. And as they collapse, something new grows out of them. So we wanted to make this piece as an introduction, as a kind of prologue to the rest of the show, and to put forward an idea of historical perspective, of a notion of a very, very, very long time of perspective in which history occurs, in which civilizations grow, disappear, and grow again, and other civilizations come back, and we are just little specks, human specks in that progress of history. The second gallery upstairs, called In Some Country Under a Sun and Some Clouds, is in a way almost the opposite of the first piece, throws you directly into the stream of history, or the idea that characters are trapped by their histories. And this is perhaps the most technologically complicated piece, even though you might not notice it. We've used green screen technology to actually place these performers in these landscapes. And the landscape is meant to evoke a kind of biblical landscape, to project this entrapment to a very, very ancient notion of narratives and stories that we tell about ourselves, about our origins, that are rooted in some ancient conflict of revenge or sacrifice. I mean, those are two themes that are presented here. But the characters are... so...
I'm just going to jump ahead because I'm trying to just pay attention to the time.
I also want to add that it's important to know that in terms of passion and originary stories, that Sammy's training and his focus early on was experimental theater in the Brechtian tradition and many others. In New York in the early 80s, and Anthony came out of a sort of fascination with documentary photography and filmmaking, and this project that they've done here, I think, is the first project of their collaborative career where they've really been able to bring in their original fascinations that brought them into the fields, and then to really push them to the limits in interesting ways. And so the second piece that you just saw of the sort of jiggling, writhing bodies. Some people, we haven't even talked about some people. Is so much of a kind of epic performance and composition that involves dancers and sound technicians and costume designers and stylists, and it's a very theatrically based construction.
Yes, yeah.
Within
You're
a
very right about that.
documentary aesthetic.
Exactly.
Combining those two, it's true.
Should we say anything about Some People, since that's the title of the show?
Since you mentioned it. Yes. Do you want to talk about Some People?
Sure. I think that the title of the exhibition, Some People, we have borrowed kindly with permission from the late Polish poet Wisława Szymborska. She
recently passed away this year.
Yeah, she passed away last year. She received the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1996. For those of you who don't know who she was, great poetess. Anyway, when we embarked on this project, we were of course completely lost. We didn't know how can we approach this question, this deep epic question subject. Of conflict, of subject matter, and quite by mistake, I was glancing through the New Yorker one time, and there was a poem of hers, and that I read, and I really enjoyed it. It was a really beautiful poem. I don't remember that poem now, but days later, I went to the bookstore and I found a collection of her poetry, and I bought it, I brought it home, and then I found this poem called Some People. Some people flee some other people under a sun and some clouds, in a land under a sun and some clouds, and I read the poem, and it became almost like oh, this is what we need to do, not necessarily illustrate the poem or paraphrase it phrase by phrase or anything like that, but there was a synthesis of the epic and the simple, the epic and the minuscule in the poem that was just startling. That was like, this is what we need to accomplish. And I don't know whether we did or not, but at least it was our signpost. And I showed it immediately to Anthony and said, look, read this, because she has found it. She's found this combination of a very grand theme. In this particular case of the poem, it's about refugees, about displacement, of people who have lost everything and have been forced into unknown lands, unknown situations, wrong turns, wrong bridges. And we felt very keenly that should be our, the way that we could work.
Shall we move on?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Gentlemen,
this piece you're looking at now
started
is
this morning in
the third of the 4
grid
galleries that we have installed upstairs. Just some
I am only reporting based on field observations,
arranged to
and at this point it is unclear whether there has been any significant damage to the linking process. It is of the utmost importance that this conversation remains secure, as we are still dealing with the consequences of last year's crisis of reinterpretation.
Name for the location that
as it stands now,
very close
the objects in question have been positively identified as safe and can be incorporated into the normative without the risk of counterattack.
And the detail and the analysis.
However,
and the scientific
it seems possible that some transhistorical contamination has occurred, possibly planted by foreign agents,
we didn't know what we would do,
and that would put our findings in jeopardy.
And we stayed
Remember,
2 days. We got up at 4:30.
As providers of private outsourced services, we stand for only the utmost purity.
11:30.
And we must protect and enforce the command structure to ensure that the timeline proceeds according to the stated goals.
They have naps, they get together and they talk about their findings.
State, interior, and energy will be cooperating in diffusing the possible repercussions, but only the facts on the ground will determine the outcome of this intrusion of doubt.
There's actually a Christian university in Nebraska that
new recruits in locus 2066 grid HI 5455 stratum 5 have ensured a total number of 12 find baskets west of the Iron H2B sacrificial high place.
for evidence.
This locus represents remnants of the packed great lore and unbeaten
it just adds another layer
which must
of
remain
complexity
unassailed
to the question
and hermeneutically
of
sealed.
what
I
is being
repeat,
looked at and what is being
unassailed and hermeneutically sealed.
And the fact is that this
Remains of a
is
larger floor of the plaza
historically,
adjacent
this is
to
not
the city.
just random. 3 of the apostles were born in this place. So there is very, very high likelihood that Jesus actually was there. So how do you determine that? How do you find that that is actually the case? It became a totally fascinating story to us. But then, of course, next to that, there are also Israeli archaeologists, trying to prove that before Jesus was there, that was a Jewish town and had been a Jewish town for millennia before that. And they're looking at sacrificial places and traces of blood and sacrifice. And the question of sacrifice becomes really important in determining history, who was sacrificing to whom at that particular moment in time.
And I think this barrage of claims to land and to identity and the confusion that comes from all of the determination is so much what the work tries to encapsulate without taking one position in particular.
We're more puzzled by it, or sort of trying to understand, what drives people to become some people, to exercise power over other people, or claim over other people, or be victims of other people, because it's a very complicated symbiotic relationship that occurs there.
It's a good segue.
So this is the 4th and final piece that you will find in the gallery upstairs. This is an excerpt, I think, yes. Just a presentation of how it looks.
Oh, it really is updated.
Yeah, we changed a few things.
It looks very much like it looks upstairs now.
But essentially, here you have the two of us appearing in our own work, performing.
For the first time.
For the first time ever.
For the first time appearing in your own
We felt
work.
that it was really vital for us to mark this journey in this
occupied West Bank is booming. Direct peace talks
Down,
between
up or
Israelis
down?
and Palestinians have been suspended over the settlements issue. Israel has so far refused to extend
Our studio is very close to PS1 in Queens and Long Island City.
Palestinians say
It's essentially the day in the life of two fools going to work,
trying to make work about the conflict in the Middle East.
and the biblical epicness of it all, and what fools we are. And there you have it.
Costume design by.
Well, actually, it's interesting about the costume. The costumes really are the piece.
Yeah.
We had this notion when we were living in Berlin that we needed to have costumes for us built, designed, fabricated, built impeccably by this woman living in Berlin,
Yashi Tabasomi,
who works with Robert Wilson and the German theater company. I mean, it's a really incredible object, these two costumes. We didn't know what we'd do with them until we got back to New York several months later, when we realized that we should just wear them as if we are doing our daily duty. And here we have it, making sense of all of the material that we collected and all of the footage and all of the photography and all of the notes and all of this density of experience that we collected during our time traveling as we did, and finding our way into it and finding meaning in it and finding a place for ourselves in it and being able to justify being in it, because we're not in it, frankly. We are living. We're born and raised in the Americas. Sammy's from South America. I'm from New England. What are we doing in these costumes in this place? And we needed to address that in a very absurd and mannered way. And what you'll find upstairs is the result. I don't think we want to show too much of the piece itself because I think we'd rather encourage you to go up to the Forefront Gallery. There's an appetizer. We actually prepared a script, which we're not going to get into because we wanted to maybe share. We have a PowerPoint. We have excerpts from our blog. We kept a daily journal for this.
They actually made a book called Residency.
9 months called The Residency. We every day went on to our blog, which I hate that word, but it was a kind of journal that we kept so that our friends and family could just follow our journey. And Lisa became really engaged with this journal that we kept as a way to document the experience, the emotions, the reflections, the observations. Instead of reading it tonight, I think it's probably best to take questions and direct you to the blog, which is on our website, which you can find at azizcucher.net, because the truth is we're out of time. Thank you.